Hey everybody, welcome to the briefing room. I'm ABC's Devin Dwyer in Washington. Great to have you with us on this Wednesday. A lot to get into, including some major developments in the abortion battle in this country, ramping up in some southern states and elsewhere that are passing restrictive measures. Also, those new warnings about Iran. We talk about those today with Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. She's ahead. Also, we take a trip out to Montana, where our Mary Alice Parks got an exclusive one-on-one today with Governor Steve Bullock, who, of course, just entered the presidential race, so we'll hear from him coming up. But we start with the abortion battle, which is playing out now in Ground Zero, Alabama, the state overnight becoming the first to pass the most restrictive anti-abortion measure in the United States. It outlaws all procedures of all kinds, except in a select number of cases when the life of the mother is at risk. Republican Governor Ivey is expected to sign the bill shortly, sure to spark a legal fight. And our Megan Keneally, ABC News reporter in New York, has been covering this story and the abortion battles in this country for quite some time. She joins us now. Megan, great to see you. So this Alabama measure passed overwhelmingly, and it's being celebrated now by pro-life groups, big time.
It is. It's Alabama's bill that was passed Tuesday night in the Senate. That was the latest bill, latest state where they put a restrictive abortion ban in place. The Senate voted 25 in favor of the bill and 7 against, with only 3 abstentions. So it obviously passed overwhelmingly. That follows after the Alabama House of Representatives passed it just 2 weeks ago, and they passed it with 74 members voting in favor of it as well.
And Megan, one of the things that's so interesting about this bill, which is nearly a blanket abortion ban, is that the supporters of the bill said they explicitly want the Supreme Court to take this up. This is gunning for the Supreme Court, right?
Absolutely. That's the pure intention of this bill. I actually spoke to the House bill's sponsor, Terry Collins, last week, and she told me in no uncertain terms they want it to go to the Supreme Court. She said that they crafted the language specifically so that they didn't include any exemptions, like exemptions in the cases of rape and incest, which are so commonly included in abortion bills. They decided to avoid all of that in the hopes that they talk really about the heart of the matter that they think is the Roe v. Wade decision. It's about whether or not a personhood, essentially, is the issue.
They're hoping to relitigate the personhood matter. Of course, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, another big case in '92, found that states can't impose undue burdens on women seeking access to abortion services before 24 weeks. So hard to see how this isn't an undue burden, but we'll see if it makes it to the court. But you've also looked at the bigger picture here, Megan. Let's put this into some context. Alabama isn't the first state this year to go big on abortion. This is part of a flood of litigation headed toward the court because of its new conservative majority.
Absolutely. There are a number of conservative states where they've passed various restrictions on abortions or abortion bans in the hopes that they get legal challenges and make it to the Supreme Court. It's really a matter of which state gets there first. There have been 3 heartbeat bans, so-called heartbeat bans, which bans abortion at the point of a fetal heartbeat being detected. And then also Mississippi has a ban where they banned any abortions after 15 weeks into a pregnancy, but that already got slammed down in court as saying that that was unconstitutional.
Yeah, we'll see those Mississippi, Louisiana bills, which you mentioned. Indiana has some laws, all of those before the Supreme Court right now, likely to get looked at before Alabama, but certainly a fight you will continue to follow. Megan Keneally for us in New York. Thanks so much, Megan. Moving on now to the new threat emerging from the Middle East and from Iran. We've been talking a lot about it here this week. Overnight, ABC News has learned now that the White House, that the congressional leaders, top congressional leaders, the so-called Gang of 8, the leaders of both parties, will now receive a confidential, classified briefing on these threats we've been hearing about tomorrow up on Capitol Hill. Meanwhile, the State Department has announced they are shutting down, effectively closing the U.S. Embassy in Iraq because of these threats, leaving all non-essential personnel to evacuate there. Both sides yesterday, Iran and the United States, President Trump saying they're not looking for war, but it certainly is feeling much more dangerous. Our Louis Martinez is over at the Pentagon. He's been tracking the latest developments here. Louis, this evacuation of non-essential personnel from the embassy, one of the largest embassies in the world, seems like a really big deal.
No, it is, Devin. It's a significant move on the part of the U.S. State Department in order to protect its personnel. You said it. It's one of the world's largest embassies for the United States, and so therefore they want to make sure that their personnel, the non-essential personnel, are taken care of. And so that's why they're ordering the partial evacuation of these individuals.
And Louis, break down for us what intelligence we know about so far when it comes to these threats. There's a lot of talk about the threats. President Trump the other day said it's so serious you don't even want to know about it. But what do we know about it?
Well, what we do know is that there were specific threats that were Iran passing on information to its proxies. These are Shiite militias, either in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, essentially saying you can attack American forces in the Middle East, be it in Iraq, be it in Syria, or attacking U.S. ships, forces in the area. That's what led to the CENTCOM to sending the aircraft carrier and to sending those bombers to Qatar to deter Iran from pushing through. But what we heard from senior U.S. officials just a short time ago was that they are seeing more information, more intelligence continuing to flow from Iran to those proxy groups, essentially saying gather more resources, but not specific information about an imminent attack or the timing of an attack. It's more about urging them to attack. But that is significant because that's kind of the information flow that we're seeing. And now we've seen this recent incident with those 4 freighters off the coast of the United Arab Emirates. U.S. officials say indications are that it was an Iranian proxy group that was responsible for placing external charges on the waterline of these vessels that left gashes maybe 5 to 10 feet in them. So more intelligence being gathered on that, but that's kind of the stream that's coming in right now.
Yeah, and the big question is how will the United States, how will Saudi Arabia and others respond as that intelligence picture becomes clearer? Louis Martinez, thanks so much. We caught up just a short time ago with one of the members of the the House Armed Services Committee, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, an Iraq War veteran herself, also running for President of the United States, to talk to her about the Iran threat and what she'd do about it. Congresswoman, it's so great to see you. We just heard from Louis Martinez a little bit about the threat picture right now coming from Iran. Have you been briefed at all on that intelligence, and do you buy the threat the administration is laying out?
There hasn't been a comprehensive presentation of the intelligence that the administration keeps citing. This is something that's necessary for us in Congress to see. What we have heard so far has been shallow and superficial at best. What we're seeing instead are actions coming from President Trump and his administration, led by John Bolton, that are dangerously escalating us closer and closer towards a devastating war with Iran.
Do you think they're exaggerating the threat? Do you think, as someone who served in Iraq, you know well the lead up to the Iraq war, do you see parallels here? Is this something that our country may do? Okay.
This is the problem. You know, I've served in the Army National Guard now for over 16 years, still currently serve as a major, have served in Congress now for over 6 years on both the Foreign Affairs and the Armed Services Committees, and went through this same thing in Iraq, a war that was championed by people like John Bolton, who lied to us and the American people, saying, you know, Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. He's going to give them to al-Qaeda, evidence that turned out to be false. But that led us to a devastating war in Iraq that took over 4,000 American service members' lives, injuring many more, killing and injuring countless Iraqis, and strengthening terrorist groups like ISIS and al-Qaeda. The reality of what we're seeing here is it appears John Bolton is using that same playbook once again to lead our country into war with Iran, a war that the American people need to understand would be far more costly and devastating than anything that we saw in the war in Iraq. Costly on American lives, costly in terms of taxpayer dollars that would pay for this war, costly in the lives of the Iranian people and those in the region who would be dealing with the consequences of this war, what to speak of an exacerbated refugee crisis that we'd see across Europe.
The president says he'd be open, Congresswoman, open to talking to Iran and sitting down with them to try to defuse this. Would you be open to something like that if you were president?
Absolutely. The only way to prevent war is to have these direct negotiations, to have these meetings, whether they be with friends or adversaries or potential adversaries. It is in the best interest of the American people, our national security, and in the interest of peace to be able to have these engagements, seeing war ultimately as the very, very last resort. We are nowhere near that. And to my knowledge, there hasn't been any of these kinds of direct negotiations between this administration and the Iranian government.
Foreign policy, as you know, hasn't been a big topic yet on the campaign trail. That could change now that Joe Biden, of course, has gotten into the race. As you know, he's one of the front runners, and foreign policy is his strong suit. I know you're eager to have a debate on this subject. What distinguishes your foreign policy from his? Tell our younger audience what would be your calling card.
You know, like I said, as a soldier, I understand the importance of our national security and the huge responsibility that a president has to serve as commander-in-chief. I've also seen and experienced the cost of war firsthand, and am committed as commander-in-chief to end these wasteful regime change wars, the likes of which we have seen in Iraq and Libya and Syria, and which we are seeing this administration trying to push and carry out in countries like Venezuela and Iran. I would end those wasteful regime change wars, work to end this new Cold War and nuclear arms race, and take the trillions of dollars that we have wasted on these wars and programs, and that will continue to waste unless we make this policy change, and invest those limited resources back into serving the needs of the American people. Things like healthcare, education, infrastructure, protecting our environment, affordable housing. The needs that the American people have are great. I would change our foreign policy to make it so that it is one that keeps the American people safe and that truly serves the interests of the American people.
Finally, real quickly, before we let you go, Congresswoman, we've got to ask you a question that a lot of the male candidates have been asked so far this campaign. You know, Joe Biden even the other day asked if he would commit to having a woman on his ticket. It seems to be the question of the week. What do you think about having two women on a Democratic presidential ticket in 2020?
I think that'd be just fine. I think most people in this country, the voters of this country, are most interested in looking at who is the best qualified to serve them as president and commander-in-chief. That's why I'm running for president and why I'm offering to serve them in that way.
Tulsi Gabbard, Congresswoman of Hawaii, four-time Congresswoman, also Democratic candidate for President of the United States in 2020. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us on ABC News Live.
Thank you.
Turning now to a significant milestone in healthcare policy in this country, we head out west to Washington State, where this week that state became the first in the nation to introduce a universal public option inside the private health insurance system. So a government-run health insurance plan that's available to everybody. Governor Jay Inslee, the Democrat out there who is also running for president, signed it into law. And we're joined now by State Senator David Fraucht, who sponsored the bill and helped design the legislation. State Senator, great to see you joining us via Skype. Thank you so much for coming in. So a lot of fascination with this plan, the first of its kind in the nation. A lot of discussion as to whether it might be a model for the country. Tell us about it, how you came up with it, and how it works.
Well, we're facing out in Washington State the same problems that many are facing around the country in the individual market. That's a relatively small part of our health insurance market here in Washington. We've done a good job of expanding under the Affordable Care Act. But basically, people who are in this market, only about 4 or 5% of our people, are seeing really high premiums and high deductibles. And the goal of this bill is to bring in a state contracted plan with standardized benefits that will drive down costs. And so the very simple goal is, as I said throughout the debate on this bill, is lower premiums and lower deductibles for the people who purchase this insurance product.
So is this basically a response to high prices on the Obamacare marketplaces, or would the Washington State plan in effect be cheaper than the Obamacare plan?
Well, we think it will drive down costs and have some competitive pressures in our exchange marketplace for sure. I would say that it's really in response in many ways to Trump administration policies that we felt were driving up costs in this market because of their reduced cost sharing and reinsurance changes that they made. But we decided to take this step. Governor Inslee proposed it. We had good support throughout, and we were able to to get this through. And we're excited with the prospects of lowering deductibles and cost sharing for people, and also hopefully seeing premiums be reduced in this space, hopefully up to at least 10%.
The projections certainly are interesting that I've seen out of your state. By some accounts, the premium will be 10% cheaper than current plans that are out there because of those caps you're talking about. Also, this plan would be available for anybody and everybody to buy if they wanted to at any time. How's it been received out there in Washington State? It is a blue state. How have folks been talking about this plan?
Well, I think the main issue that we had, really the only issue that we had on the plan was how are we actually going to drive down costs? And I think what the plan, if you look at it and take a step back, what it really reflects is a larger sentiment that the government has to be more involved in finding ways to reduce costs in the healthcare system. We've done it through some pharmaceutical cost transparency programs out here as well. And this is another way for us to drive down premiums. And we've done it by pegging our reference rates for provider reimbursement to Medicare, but at a much higher rate than Medicare, 160% of Medicare on average. That was the most controversial part about the bill. But we think we've looked at the data. We think that will work. We don't think that's going to distort the small group marketplace and other marketplaces as well. Let me be clear. I don't think that this is the ultimate answer. I do think we need to have a universal system nationally. And that's where I hope we're going to go. But for what we can do now, given the administration in Washington, we think this is a very important first step.
Yeah, certainly a stepping stone, perhaps, to some of the other proposals that Governor Inslee and others have put out there on the campaign trail. And I understand 8 other states are actually looking at following the proposal, David Frocht, that you laid out there. So very interesting stuff. Thank you so much. State Senator David Frocht of Washington State, out now with the first ever state public health insurance option in the marketplace. Great to see you, sir. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Turning now to an ABC News Live exclusive. We got one-on-one access with the newest Democratic presidential candidate in the race this week, Governor Steve Bullock of Montana. And our esteemed Deputy Political Director, Mary Alice Parks, got to spend some time with him out in Montana just the past 24 hours and joins us live now. Mary Alice, great to see you. So what'd you guys do together and what'd you learn about Steve Bullock that people should know?
Well, first, it seemed like a really typical morning. You had a father there in his workout clothes, drinking coffee with a newspaper. His teenage daughter had her AP Calculus study materials out on the table, Cheerios and homemade Mother's Day cards. But of course, it was anything but typical. The dad was the governor, and he had just moments before signed and pressed send on his official launch, beginning a presidential race. So it was pretty incredible to get that level of access, to see a presidential candidate in his home and to talk to him about his nervousness, his excitement, but also some of the areas where he plans to draw some sharp contrast with some of the other Democrats in the race. So take a look at our part of our interview.
Well, apparently the first thing you have to do is sign the formal papers.
First I got to sign some things and get moving, huh? So this is the signing of the FEC document that actually makes me an official candidate. There we go.
Thoughts?
Excited to get going.
Are you nervous this morning?
No, not really. I mean...
No?
This is big. And that's daunting, but I'm not nervous this morning. I'm excited this morning, really excited about being able to share what we have done and what we can do.
It feels casual around the table with you guys. Is this how you thought it would feel to announce the family was running for president?
I don't know. I think that signing was a little bit anticlimactic. But I think the whole announcing as a president candidate, it's more of a mindset than it is anything. It's a mindset that you want to go out there and change the world. You want to make it so everyone gets that fair shot. And I think he already has that mindset, and we're just developing that mindset, me and Cam, to push him over the finish line.
So in the spirit of an AP Calc exam, can I do like a lightning round of policy? Can I quiz you?
Oh, I thought you were going to do lightning round of calculus.
No, I couldn't even pretend.
So,
I couldn't even pretend to quiz you. Abolishing electoral college.
From my perspective, we got to talk about how it is that we're not winning in these places instead of getting rid of that.
Expanding the Supreme Court.
I've actually argued in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. I want to believe it's non-political. I think when Senator McConnell held up Garland, that showed a little bit different. So I'm open to options to make sure that we don't politicize the court.
And you were talking about expanding Medicaid. What about Medicare for all?
I think access and affordability are the two things that we really got to focus on. In Montana, we've increased the access. I mean, 10% more of our population has Medicaid expansion. And we've cracked down on affordability, from prescription benefit managers, pharmacy benefit managers, to high-risk pools. And there are ways to get there without Medicare for all.
Governor Bullock says that his success winning in a red state provides a roadmap now for his presidential campaign. Still, he's going to have to convince voters that he can replicate what he did in Montana nationwide.
What are you doing out here?
This is a beautiful spot.
It is a beautiful spot. And you look out, what's cool is like all of this is public lands around here. So it's all running trails. It's always been one of my favorite spots when I'm running, because I used to live just right over there. We still have our real house, and the kids were kind of raised in this area, and it's just a great little loop.
The Democrats from the coast are often asked how they can relate to the middle of the country. And so you're making this pitch that you can relate to rural America. But what do you say to a voter in LA, in New York City, about how you relate to their life?
Yeah, and you know, I've lived in those areas. I went to college right outside Los Angeles, went to law school and worked in New York. Really, people want the same things, don't they? They want a safe community. They want a decent job, good schools, believe you can do better for your kids and grandkids. Some people call this the flyover part of the country, right? If all the flyover states are sort of don't feel like the Democratic Party even connects with them, even if we win, we'll never be able to get back to governing.
All right, so you saw it here first with Mary Alice Parks, Steve Bullock signing the papers to run for president in his running shorts. And then there was Mary Alice as he came to the finish line. Mary Alice, did you have a stopwatch there with you when he was, how fast does he actually run?
They asked if I wanted to run with him, and I was like, there is no way I could keep up with the governor. He was pretty fast.
It was great stuff. Great to see behind the scenes.
You probably could have caught up with him.
Well, we won't compare mile times right now here in the briefing room. But really great stuff, Mary Alice. Thank you so much. And know you're coming back. You'll be back with us here tomorrow. Turning now to a story that deserves a little bit more attention that we could put a spotlight on here in the briefing room today. It's systemic discrimination in the adoption and foster care system in our country. And Arlana Zach was up on Capitol Hill today because the story is getting a little bit of star power today.
It is.
You were tagging along up there.
Yeah, well, there's 120,000 children right now that are waiting for adoption in the foster care system. And most of those agencies are faith-based institutions that are placing them. And in 10 different states, there is legal discrimination against LGBTQ couples, people based off of their marital status, and even based off of their religion. In South Carolina, people who are Catholic or Jewish have been told that they aren't able to adopt based off of the private faith of that foster care agency. And so I was speaking with a comedian and I was speaking with a Queer Eye host, Alex Mapa and Karamo Brown, who are, he's famous for being one of the hosts of Queer Eye.
Trying to bring attention to the issue.
Yeah, really using their voice to advocate for what they have in their family. Take a listen.
Can you just share with our viewers the problem that kids are facing in the system and that parents who want to adopt are facing if they don't fit the traditional look?
There are 400,000 kids in the foster care system at any one given time. 100,000 of those kids are up for adoption. Nobody wants them over the age of 3. Nobody wants a boy, and if they're African American, yikes.
And you adopted an African American boy.
I'm Asian. My husband is white. Our son is black. We look like the last 2 minutes from It's a Small World.
The state is saying to me, because I am a single man, because I am gay, that there are issues here.
So let me just make sure I understand it.
Yeah.
This is your biological son's brother.
Yes.
Right?
Uh-huh.
You're already a family.
Already a family.
The biological mother supports you having him and bringing him into your family officially.
Yep.
But the state doesn't.
The state does not. Anytime you allow someone to discriminate against giving a child an opportunity that every child deserves, it's that simple. Every child deserves love and support and kindness. This is not something that we should be arguing.
And the problem, Devin, really goes both ways, not only for non-traditional families who want to welcome a child into their home, but also for LGBTQ youth who, in some states, it's still legal to have conversion therapy, which has been widely debunked. It's been shown to increase depression, suicidal tendencies among those children, and that can still happen in some of these states. So both for the children who are in the system and for families who want to be connected with them, they were all there on the Hill advocating for the Every Child Deserves a Family Act, which was introduced initially in 2017 as a bipartisan bill. It didn't receive traction before, but
this is in the House.
It was introduced in both the House and the Senate.
Oh,
in the Senate,
okay.
Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is the sponsor of it. She's looking for a Republican co-sponsor. Doesn't have that yet, but they feel optimistic that this is actually a bipartisan issue, that our country has evolved in our understanding that families are more diverse than the Leave It to Beaver sort of traditional family.
And the foster system, adoption system need to catch up with that.
Absolutely, and who can argue with the idea that every child deserves a family?
Yeah, an uplifting note, something to follow. Lana Zach, always great to have you with us. Great to see you today, and great to have you with us here in the briefing room on this very busy Wednesday. I hope you follow all the stories we talked about today on the ABC News app. Download it if you don't have it. You can watch us live there. Also track the latest reporting coming in 24/7 from ABC News. We're back here tomorrow, 3:30 Eastern Time. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Hope to see you then.